Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at day number 3, the final day of the 2025 Louisiana State Championship, featuring the final 2 rounds, rounds number 6 and 7. Now, oftentimes, I start my recaps diving right into the games, but when you do that, usually when I give everybody the information towards the end of the video, many people have already clicked away. So as such, I'm going to start and give my overall impressions so you guys hear, rather than jumping immediately into these final 2 games that I played today. So let's start from the top. Now, playing this tournament was really a throwback for me to my younger years. When I was a young child and I was first getting into chess, I played many tournaments that were very similar to this event, whether it was in a conference room, a small room on a second or a third floor of a hotel. There were many such events for me. I'm playing this tournament with players of all different backgrounds. There were young kids, there were older gentlemen, people from all different backgrounds, different countries. It really did harken to a different time in my life when I first started playing chess. On top of that, there were a lot of familiar surroundings. For example, the rounds were played very early in the morning. The games were played at 9 a.m. and then there were afternoon games at 2 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. With the rounds being so sort of early in the day and also pairings not being published until right before the rounds, it was another familiar thing to me, similar to when I was younger, where you would look at your pairing 10 to 15 minutes before the round and you would simply jump in, play your game, no time to prepare. You would just show up with the openings that you knew and you would go from there. So it was really, really nice to have that feeling like I had all those years ago. It was also really nice to see the many, many fans locally here in Louisiana who are really, really cheering for me. They definitely want me to make the candidates and qualify. So big shout out to all of them. Thank you so much for the love and support. I'm going to do my best to get there. And it goes without saying that it's just been a phenomenal event. Now, all this happiness aside, of course, you guys can probably tell I'm a little bit emotional because I'm not going to lie, I'm in the twilight of my career. I probably figure I have 1 candidate, maybe 2 more left at most. Definitely, it is very nostalgic, sort of returning to the roots of how I began playing chess. Nonetheless, there were 2 games to be played today, and in the 6th round, I was playing against the number 2 seed, the 3-time defending Louisiana State champion, Nicholas Matta. Now, I might be mispronouncing his name, but I think it's Matta, if I'm not mistaken, so I apologize in advance to Nicholas if I got his last name wrong. So I'm playing against Nicholas Matta, the 3-time defending champion. He actually showed up a little bit late to the round. He was about 5 to 10 minutes late, but as we were playing on the 2nd floor at the Loyola University here in New Orleans, I saw him walking towards the entrance with a big Louisiana trophy and sunglasses on his face as well. So he's coming in with the trophy, the defending champion, ready to put up a big fight, and let's dive into the action. Now, I started with the move d4, and Nicholas played d5, c4, e6, knight c3, and now he got the move knight to f6. In this position, I traded, played bishop g5, and now he played the move c6. Now, I must add that despite Nicholas's low rating, it is noteworthy that he has played against some strong players. In fact, he played against Hans Niemann from the United States, and he also played against Levy Rosman in an international norm tournament, I believe, late last year, a game which I actually did cover at the time. So even though he has a low rating, he's had a lot of experience, and generally the more experience you have playing against better players, the less afraid or scared you are of their aura. So I play e3, we get bishop d6, and now I play the move bishop d3, we get castles, knight to f3, and we get the move rook e8. Now thus far, I had seen that Nicholas had played this bishop d6 move in 1 game before, so it wasn't a big surprise, but after I castled, he played the move bishop g4. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this video, obviously I thought I would be playing against it, but I wasn't sure until I arrived at the playing site this morning at about 8:25 a.m., with the game starting at 9 a.m., so I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, so I kind of was familiar they might play something like this, but when he played the move bishop g4, this was a big surprise to me. Now, during the game, I was thinking to myself, what do I want to do here? I had a feeling this move was a little bit dubious, and the 2 moves that I considered were queen to b3 or queen c2. Now, the computer says queen b3 is the best move, and apparently here black is supposed to play the move knight to a6, and now after this move bishop to h4, white is a little bit better, but when you're playing someone so much lower rated, you definitely are thinking about what your strengths are and what you want to avoid. Now, queen b3 might be the best move, but if my opponent is prepared adequately here, and for example, bishop takes f3 is possible, and I go queen takes b7, and there's some knight a6 line, for example, if my opponent has memorized this, I could end up losing a game or drawing a game just because I've walked into hard preparation. So, even though queen b3 might be the best move here, I end up going for the quieter move queen to c2, trying to line up some threats on the diagonal. Now here we get the move pawn to h6, bishop to h4, and we get the move knight bd7. Now it's worth noting that black can take the knight on f3, but after takes, let's say knight d7, and now king to h1, even though I have these double pawns, I have an open file for my rook, and I have the bishop combo to boot, so I'm doing very well in this position. So We get knight b7. I play rook e1, we get knight f8, and now I play the move knight d2. Now here we got the move bishop to h5, and I'm not going to lie, at this point I was very, very impressed by Nicholas's play up to this point. I actually thought I was going to be squeezing him pretty much from the get-go, but he's showing great understanding here by putting the bishop on h5 with the idea of bishop to g6, trying to trade off this light square bishop. So I go f4, and now he immediately blitzes out g5, and as soon as I saw this move on the board, I started feeling very uncomfortable about this position. I thought I was still okay, but I wasn't actually sure if I was even better. Now, in this position, I played the move bishop g3. I could have maybe tried to take this pawn on g5, but after knight to g4, suddenly there are all kinds of tactics. The pawn on h2 and e3 are weak, pawn on g5 also under attack, and I have no idea what is even going on. Now, of course, computers are ridiculous, and apparently after knight to f3, I can sack the rook, and after takes, bishop e7, there's something ridiculous like g4 here, and white's apparently better. I'm going to be honest, I did not even see this. I don't think Magnus would have seen this in a game. This is simply computer chess at its finest. So I go bishop g3 back here, we get the move knight to g6, and now I play the move bishop takes knight. Now I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit flustered here because g5 was played instantly, and after I played the move bishop g3 here, I was expecting the move knight g4. This is what I had calculated, and I thought that after knight to d1, I was doing okay here. I wasn't sure what was happening after queen to c7 with a lot of pressure in the center of the board, but the game goes on. But then when knight g6 is blitzed out, and it's a move that's very logical and I hadn't considered, I start to panic and I end up going for the move bishop takes knight. Now the computer again thinks that white is okay here after knight to f3, because I guess if black takes, knight takes f4, apparently I can play bishop f5 here, and even though I'm down a pawn on f4, the position is balanced, another line which I simply didn't really consider, so ultimately I decided to take the knight. We get bishop takes bishop, queen to d1. And now we get the move bishop to d3. Now this is a move that looks very pretty. Black activates the light square b, targeting the rook. But I think in retrospect, this move is probably an inaccuracy here. I think what Nicholas should have done here is played something like maybe bishop to h5 was possible. I also thought there was some h5, not bishop h5, sorry, h5 as well. I thought was kind of interesting here. Both these moves I think make some sense. But the problem is that after bishop d3 and rook to f2, now the best move, actually the only move for black to not be worse, is to play the very anti-human move bishop to g6 back, simply retreating this bishop and saying, you know what, it's on white to prove that white is better. Now, I think this move can be found by a top GM. In fact, I actually was wondering what I would do had he played bishop g6. But for someone who's a little bit lower rated, playing bishop d3 and then going back here, it's very tough. Also because if you look at this position optically, black has the bishop pair, and with white's pawns like this, you feel like you should be better. So then if you go bishop g6, you're sort of admitting that white can go rook f1, and then you have to take a draw, but you also think you're better, so you get caught in no man's land. And this is where Nicholas makes the big mistake. He plays the move g4 here. Nick, I should say, sorry. He plays the move g4 here, and now this allows him to move bishop to h4, and all of a sudden there's this very nasty pin, there's a weak pawn on g4, and I have this big threat of e4 as well, and just like that, with one serious error, Mata has thrown the game away, and now I'm in full control. So we get the move h5, logical move here, so if I take on f6, now the pawn on h5 will guard this pawn on g4. So we get h5. Now here I spent a lot of time, 15 minutes before playing the move queen b3, and I spent a lot of time here because my first instinct was to play this move pawn to e4, blasting open the center, but after takes, and knight takes rook, king takes, and rook takes d8, I actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out if I was doing well here or if this was a forge. So I'll give you a sample line. King g3, bishop c7, queen b3, and bishop b6 here. And apparently white is winning after queen to e3, but I saw lines like rook d5, and I thought this might be a fortress for black here. Without me knowing that this is concrete and I'm winning by force, it's very hard to go for this, because when you're playing someone much lower rated, they don't have to think. My opponent is going to set up the rook and the bishop on these squares, and if I win, I win, but if I'm wrong, it's just going to be a draw, and my opponent will have no opportunity to make any mistakes. So apparently this is completely winning, I guess, because after queen to e7 takes and queen takes b7 with the active king, all the weak pawns here, apparently this is simply winning. But even looking at it right now, I'm still a little bit unconvinced that it's really all that easy. But ultimately, after thinking for so long and reaching the conclusion that I didn't know for sure that it was winning, I went for the backup line, which was to play queen to b3 here, attacking the pawn on b7. Now here we get to move bishop to a6. This is probably the final blunder in the position. Black can try to fight on with this move bishop to e7, because if white takes the pawn here, black can go queen to b6, and after takes, even though white is up a pawn in the center of the board here, black has the two b's. This pawn at e3 is very, very weak here, and black also has an open a file, and white probably isn't better. Now, another thing I want to point out, since we're fairly early in the video, is I did do an analysis with Nick after the game, and this is a line that we did look at. So a lot of lines that I'm mentioning here are lines that we analyzed after the game ended. It's not just me looking at the engine and coming up with these variations. So bishop e7 is the move that I was most concerned about. My intention was to take. Apparently, after black plays queen takes, and queen takes d3 here, and knight to e4 takes, bishop to h4, and knight g3, c5. White is still up a pawn here and better, but black has great chance to save the game with the activity in the center of the board. Instead, we get bishop to a6, and now I go e4, and the big difference here is that now if black takes, with the queen on b3 versus d1, there's never going to be a way to attack this queen on d1 via f2, and if black goes bishop e7 here after, actually, sorry, wrong one. Sorry, I take with the other knight, knight c takes e4, after bishop e7, takes, queen to e1, I have knight f1, and here I have one extra minor piece on the board, and I will go on to win the game. So after e4, Nick plays bishop e7, I go e5, we get knight e7, I trade, and now I play this move knight to f1. Now, at first glance, you'll notice that we have even material, same number of pawns, but the big issue for black here is that this king is very, very weak. Black has pushed the p up the board, and this has created serious problems on the king side, as we're about to see. At this point, I already thought positionally I was close to winning the game, even though material is balanced. So we get takes. Now we get the move knight b6. If black were able to play a move like f5 here, clogging the center of the board here, black would still be okay, but the problem is I can go knight to g3 here, and after, say, queen f7, queen c2, now the pawns are very, very weak. If you go rook f8, there's e6 forking the queen and the knight, and black just can't hold the glue together. So we get takes, knight b6 here so that black doesn't lose the pawn, and now I go queen c2, important move because once again, if black is able to get this closed position here, black is still much worse positionally, but the game will go on. So I go queen c2, stopping f5, we get queen e6, and now I play f5, queen h6, and f6 here, and the problem basically is that all the boys are coming to the party. I'm bringing the rook, the queen, the knight, everything is headed towards the king side to annihilate this black king, and black has this knight and this rook. Both these pieces are completely on the wrong side of the board, super far away from the king, and white's attack is going to be decisive. So we get knight d7. I play h3 here, trying to open up the king side. We get takes, and now I play the move queen to f5. Now, I actually thought here that I might have made a slight inaccuracy here with h3. I thought that rook to f5 might have been a little bit better and just bringing the knight over, but h3 seemed very thematic here because I feel like with the queen and the rook and all the pieces coming over, if I can open up this g file or this h file, the black king should be checkmated. So we get takes, queen f5, we get knight to f8, and now I take the pawn. Now initially here I thought that maybe black could take on g2, and after I play move like rook to f3, maybe black can go knight f8 here, rook g3, and knight g6, and try to hang on after rook g5, h4. I guess it's still winning probably with e6 here, but nonetheless, maybe there's a chance for me to make a mistake. Instead, we get knight f8, and now after queen takes h3, with rook f5 in coming to go after this pawn on h5, and the knight coming over the king side, the game is effectively over. So we get rook e6, rook f5, h4, knight to e2, trying to reroute the knight to target the rook. We get knight g6, and now I play the move rook f1. Here, Nick plays queen d2. Main point behind rook f1 is, let's just say black goes c5. After knight f4 takes here, the rooks are just running towards the king here. This h file and g file are completely open, and the black king is getting checkmated. So we get queen d2, I play queen g4. I could have also played knight f4 here. This leads to a very beautiful finish as well. Black takes all the pawns here. But after takes, I have queen d7 here. The rook is guarding the pawn on f6, and I'm threatening the classic lolly checkmate with queen g7. But even though I saw that that was winning, I want to be a little bit more precise. I also wanted to meme and try to sack the rook, so I go queen g4 instead. We get king f8, and now I play rook g5. And at this point, I'm trying to sack the rook for the knight on g6 to either checkmate on the g file or win the rook on e6. Nick plays queen e3, I go rook to f2, plays queen e4, and now I play knight to f4, and in this position, Nick Matter resigns the game here because if black takes a knight, there's rook g8, checkmating the king. King cannot escape here. If black plays I actually don't know what black can play, like rook to e8, for example. There probably are 20 ways to win, but simplest would be to play something like rook takes knight, sacking the rook, and after takes, knight takes, king f7. There's a beautiful sack, knight to h8 check, and after takes, check, king e8. There's f7 here, king d7, you make a queen, and now the king gets checkmated. I guess king d8 survives for an extra move, but after takes, king c7, and f8, white is up a queen, and the game is over. So that's why Nick resigns in this position, and with that, I get a big win against the second strongest player in the tournament. I moved to a score of 6 out of 6, and after winning this game, I thought that I'd finally beaten my toughest opponent, and it would be smooth sailing in the final round. Now, I say that for a reason, because in the final round, I'm playing with the black pieces against Charles Campbell Agabodega. I think he's originally from Nigeria. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but he's someone who has a rating of 2188 USCF. His FIDE is a little bit lower, around 2000, but someone that I thought could potentially put up a fight. I saw that he drew against Nick Matta earlier in the tournament, so I didn't really know what to expect, but I thought that I would probably have an easier game than I did in the 6th round. So you get d4. I play d5, knight f3, knight f6, c4, e6. We get the move knight c3, and now I play the move pawn takes pawn. Now, one of the things that I mentioned in my previous recaps, perhaps the only thing that I find really exciting about playing in these tournaments is sort of the mental mind game, sort of the things that I'm thinking about during the game, which I know my opponents are not thinking about. For example, when this occurs in the game, I'm sure my opponent's thinking about his preparation, what sort of lines he has. For me, I'm thinking about all the different possibilities and what do I want to do. So for example, I was thinking, do I want to take the pawn like in the game, where my opponent, if he plays e4, I can play something like b5 or bishop b4, leading to some very sharp lines in this Vienna gambit? Or do I want to play c6, playing a Moran? Do I think that with this pawn structure, I have more chance to create complications and win? Or do I want to play something like a6 as well, or bishop to e7, or h6? So many different thoughts are running through my mind about the different possibilities here, and that is the one thing that I find really interesting about these games, is that I'm trying to sort of predict what my opponent's going to do and hopefully get an imbalanced position. So I take. Now we get the move e3, and I sort of expected this initially, but what I kind of forgot when I played a6 here is that after takes, bishop d3, and bishop b7, white does not have to be super aggressive here. So we get castles, knight d7, and now we get to move queen to e2. Now in this position, if I were playing a 2700 player and they're out for blood, they almost certainly are going to play the very sharp variation with e4, c5, and d5, queen c7. And this is a very, very heavy theory. This was studied extensively in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and both sides have a lot of potential play. So in my mind, I was expecting something like this. But then when I saw queen e2 on the board, I was like, uh-oh, this is not going to be easy to win, because the structure of the pawns after c5 and rook to d1 is such that if we get a trade of the pawns, say queen b6 and takes, for example, the pawns are symmetrical here, and white can play something like b3 and bishop b2. White can go e4. With the symmetrical pawns, it's not going to be easy to create the imbalance to win the game. So once rook d1 was played, I spent a lot of time here. I actually spent nearly 10 minutes before taking this pawn on d4, and the reason I took this pawn was I sort of was playing a bit of poker. The reason that I took the pawn is that I thought that due to my opponent's knowledge, probably having played against what's turned into a queen's gambit accepted, I expected him to take with the pawn and not with the knight. I actually thought knight takes would be much more tricky to deal with, because after knight takes, I have to play something like bishop d6 here, and if white plays something like, I thought just knight f3 and b3, bishop b2, I wasn't really sure if I'm even better in this position, and I don't see the imbalance. But instead he takes with the pawn, and now after bishop to e7, I breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief, because now we're in the classic isolated pawn structure here. White has this isolated pawn, which I will try to blockade with knight to d5. So, after we get the move e takes d4, bishop e7, bishop g5 castles, knight e5, I play the move knight to d5. Now I'm trying to blockade this pawn. What you ideally want in these isolated pawn structures are where all the pieces come off the board, and eventually you end up in a position like this. Let's say rook d2, rook d8, rook d1, and something like queen to d7, and black just puts massive pressure on this lone weakness here, say queen e3 and e5, for example. You win the pawn, and you strategically probably should go on to win the game. So the dream when you're playing against this isolated pawn is to reach a position where there are no minor pieces, only heavy pieces on the board, and most importantly, this pawn is blockaded. So I go knight d5. We get the move queen to h5, and now I play this move f5 after a 10-minute think once again. Now initially I wanted to play the move g6, but I rejected this for a couple of reasons. First of all, after take, queen takes, and something like knight d5, bishop d5, and queen e2, I wasn't really sure why I should be better in this position here with the knight on e5. I also thought white can go bishop e4 to try to trade the light square bishops, unlike in the game, and it just didn't feel like it was quite enough. On top of that, there's also the possibility here that if I miscalculate, let's say white were to play knight takes in this position, if I were to take, I actually got checkmated here, I think, by rook to h3. Apparently, black's still in the game, I guess, after bishop h4 and queen h5. But I saw these lines with big sacrifice, and I thought, maybe I'll miss something. The only way I can lose to a player at this level is if I miss a big tactical shot. So when I looked at the combination of the fact that there might be a sacrifice and a tactic that I'm going to miss, combined with the other reason of this bishop being able to go to e4. That's ultimately why I played the move f5, slamming the door shut on the diagonal, but f5 also stops bishop to e4, forcing a bunch of trades. So we get knight takes knight. I take, we get bishop to f4, and this move I was actually very happy to see. Had Charles decided to trade all the minor pieces off here, I do believe that in this position, black should be a little bit better due to the isolated pawn, but I also have my own weakness on e6 as well, and it's not really clear how to create counterplay, how to attack this pawn on d4. It's just not easy, and I think there are very, very good drawing chances for white. Instead, we get bishop f4. I go knight f6, queen e2, queen b6, bishop to e3, and now I play the move rook fd8. Now, this move is simply a bad move. In this position, I think I should have gone queen b7, f3, and the move rook fc8 here. And the main point is that white cannot play a4, because after a4, there's going to be a bishop b3 hitting the rook here. And if white tries to play like in the game with rook to c1, now if I trade the rooks, the pawn on a2 hangs, and if white takes with the bishop, I can, I think, reroute this bishop to b6, pressuring this diagonal, and black should be a little bit better. But I go rook d8. Rook c1, queen b7, f3, and already here I realize that, my opponent wants to go a4, trying to trade off pawns on the queen side, and I actually at this point was not really sure if I was even going to be able to create winning chances in the game. So I go bishop d6, we get a4, takes, and now I play the move a5, protecting the pawn with the rook. Now in this position, we get the move bishop c4, and this, ironically enough, or not ironically enough, coincidentally enough, is probably the move that loses Charles Campbell the game here. It's not so much this move loses on the spot, but it allows me to go into an endgame where only black has chances to win. Now I thought in this position, knight c4 was a better move, or bishop d2 as well. Bishop d2 I thought was very logical, because if black were to play queen takes pawn, it's spaghetti-o time, there's rook b1, and suddenly this queen on b2 is simply getting trapped. But instead we get bishop c4, and as soon as I saw this move, I decided to trade everything off, get the knight to d5, and even though black is not necessarily much better in this position, only black can try to win because I've got this great knight, all my pawns are on the opposite color of this bishop here, and I felt like the game was going to go for a very long time. So we get this move bishop g5. Now this is the first move that I think was kind of a mistake here from Charles here. I thought bishop c5, trying to put the bishop on this diagonal, was slightly better, because after bishop g5, I played rook to f8 here. We get rook c6, h6, bishop e3, and now I play the move rook a c8, effectively forcing all the rooks off the board. Now if white were to take the pawn on e6, this would lose the game immediately, because I could trade the rooks and play queen c8, hitting both the rook and the bishop at the same time and winning the game. So we get the trade of the rooks, everything comes off, and now even though white still has even material due to this great knight, which is outposted on d5, all the pawns being on the opposite cover of the bishop pretty much, only black can try to win. So you get queen d2. I play queen c4, bishop b6, and now I play the move a4. I do not take the bishop, because after check, king f7, and queen takes b6, we're in a queen and pawn endgame with even number of pawns on the board, and white should draw this very easily. So I go a4, putting the pawn on the opposite color. Now you'll notice I have the pawns, the knight, the queen, the king. Everything's on the opposite color of this bishop, meaning the bishop has 0 targets in the position. We get bishop d4, I go king f7, g3, and now I play the move g5, and here Charles makes a fatal blunder with this move h4. I don't really blame him for playing this move. Computer seems to think that after a move like bishop to f2, white is only a little bit worse. With ideas like g4 or h5, g4, all these different pawn pushes in the position, it feels very hard to play, and once again, this bishop is so bad. All these pieces are on the opposite color, and it's just, from a human standpoint, I think it's very, very difficult to hold. And frankly, I think that if I had this position against a 2600, I would probably win it as well. And I believe if I had the white piece against a player like Magnus Carlsen, I believe that I would lose this position. So we get the move h4. I take, and now I go king g6 here, activating the king towards his pawn on the edge. And now we get the move f4. This move effectively loses on the spot as it creates another big weakness here. White can maybe try bishop to f2, but after king to h5, king to g2 in this position, and now queen d3, black is just doing very well. You have to play something like queen c1, queen e2, and with all these weaknesses, the knight jumping, it's just impossible to defend for white. So we get f4. Now I play the move queen b3, king g2, and now I play the crushing move queen to d3, a temporary Botez gambit here. If white were to take the queen, I take the pawn, forking the king and the queen. I take the queen. Now I've got an extra pawn, and with all these weaknesses and in this position, pretty much every piece except the pawn being on the opposite color of this bishop, white is just positionally lost. So you get the move queen to f2. Bishop c3 was another way to try to keep the game going, but after bishop to c3, the line that I was going to play was queen to e4, king g3, and then I thought knight to e3 was winning here, because after queen e2 and h5, white is struggling to find moves. Computer says it's winning. Apparently there's an easier way with, I guess, knight to e3, which is even cleaner. I didn't actually see this move, but apparently it wins on the spot. So we get queen to f2. Now I go king to h5, and white has no good checks on the light squares. My queen covers both squares. My king is coming forward. There's a weakness on h4. There's a weakness on f4 here, and white could pretty much resign. So you get queen to f3. I take the pawn, bishop c5, and now I go for king to h3, trying to push my h-pawn up the board. We get bishop d6, I play knight to b6 here, bishop c5, knight c4, bishop d4, and now I play h5, and white just has no targets. All my pieces here are the opposite color of this bishop. There's just nothing that white can do. We get bishop c3, h4, bishop d4, knight d2, king e2, and now I sack the knight with this move king to g2. I did not have to go for this move, but it was the prettiest way to finish the game, and basically white cannot stop my p. I'm pushing this h-pawn straight up the board. After takes h3, there's no way to stop this pawn for queenie. If you go bishop g1, I just take the bishop. If not bishop g1, I just push the pawn straight through, and the game ends. There's really nothing white can do here. This pawn just goes, no way to stop it, and for that reason, Charles Campbell resigns this game, and I get a perfect score of 7 out of 7, and I am the winner of the 2025 Louisiana State Chess Championship. Now, I have to give credit to both Nick Matta and, of course, Charles Campbell for these last two games. They both put up really, really good fights. Nick was a little bit better at one moment in the game. Charles, of course, was defending for a very long time until he made the fatal blunder. So both of these guys put up great resistance in spite of the fact that they obviously were outrated by quite a few 100 rating points. But both of these guys played with great pride. They defended very well. They played good games, and I think both players should be very, very proud of their performance. So for me, I get the win. Much more importantly, I actually have now completed 6 of the 22 required games that were left to qualify for the candidates. This means that on our road to the candidates, we have now played 24 games. We had played 18, 10 in Norway, 8 in the American Cup. That was 18. Now we've banked 6 more games here, so we've played 24 of the required 40 games in order to qualify for the 2026 candidates. So all's well that ends well with this tournament, but as we saw, even though I won all the games, my opponents had ample opportunities, but ultimately, I would end up winning them all. So I hope you guys have enjoyed these recaps from this state championship here. I had a great time once again. A big shout out to everybody who was cheering me on, all the people who asked for pictures, all the people who enjoyed me competing. Many of the players I played against said it was an honor to compete. And ultimately, I think for myself, without sounding too emotional, you know, it kind of reminds me again when I was a young kid starting, I'd seeing IMs or GMs play in tournaments and hoping I would have the opportunity to compete against them. So having that chance to do something that gives back, you know, to American chess, to these people who are playing chess casually, don't have many such opportunities, but have a story that will last a lifetime. It is really, really nice to see, and it makes me, of course, feel very good as well. So that's going to do it with my emotional bit. I hope you guys have enjoyed these recaps from this weekend here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Once again, thank you so much to everybody for watching the videos, all the local support as well. And last but not least, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with Title Tuesday tomorrow and some more recaps from my upcoming events on the road to the 2026 candidates. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.